Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
Diabetes is a plague on our society. It's so common. We don't have to have it. Many people work very hard to develop diabetes. They literally earn it, sadly, and they don't know that. We need more education on how to not have diabetes. It has to do with lifestyle. Sleeping matters because you're handling your blood sugar better when you get enough sleep. So sleeping does matter. Food, absolutely, 1,000,000% matters. Good food choices prevent diabetes, and exercise, physical activity. Now, it's great to go to a gym. Of course, right now during COVID-19, that's not the most pleasant experience. But going to a gym is a social thing. It's a wonderful thing, and you see all these other people exercising, so that kind of drives you to exercise a little bit longer and better. The thing is that exercise doesn't have to include a gym. It could just be walking around a block. It could be walking your dog. It could be walking up and down the stairs. It could be vacuuming. It could be gardening. All of that's exercise. So a lack of exercise, poor food choices, you mix that in with a lack of sleep, and wow, that really increases your risk of diabetes. So let's talk about how you handle your sugar, how we all as humans handle our sugar. When you eat food, you're breaking it down to its different components, and one of them, of course, is sugars. And these sugars can become pretty high during a meal. So the body prevents that, because when sugar is too high, it can start to damage organs, tissues, and cells. So the body releases insulin. There's a gland called your pancreas. It's partially responsible for digestion, but it's also responsible for controlling your blood sugar. So during a meal, you release insulin from the pancreas, and you drive the excess sugar, because if the body's in good balance, you leave enough sugar behind for the body's energy needs at that time, because the body, basically, you make your energy out of using sugar. So a well-balanced body, in good sync metabolically, leaves enough sugar during and after a meal for your body's energy needs, and the rest gets packed away. The insulin drives the sugar into your fat cells and your muscle and your liver, and that's one reason why having a lot of muscle and exercising is good to help prevent and even treat diabetes, because once sugar enters the muscle, it becomes muscle glycogen, and it can't escape the muscle. It's stored there until later physical activity. And the more you exercise, the more the body will take the sugar out of the blood to create additional glycogen. So muscle and exercise is great as a preventative for diabetes. Now the next thing is, in between meals, when sugar starts to go low, the pancreas releases a second hormone called glucagon to release some of the stored sugar from your fat cells and from your liver. It's called gluconeogenesis, making new glucose, making new sugar. So when you don't eat well, when you're eating a lot of crackers and muffins and sugary foods and foods with a lot of saturated fat, the body has to work harder to store the sugar. So your insulin is going up. That's called your fasting insulin. You can have a blood test looking at how much insulin is in your blood, because if the insulin is rising, that can predict later on that you can have a situation where you're going towards pre-diabetes or diabetes. Even before everything else is going wrong, fasting insulin is an early indicator that something's going wrong with your blood sugar control and your metabolism. So fasting insulin, if it's normal, hey, that's good. If it's high, there's an issue here, because you're releasing too much insulin. And then they look at insulin sensitivity. Your cells are supposed to be very sensitive to the effects of insulin. Your muscle cells, your fat cells, your liver cells. And if you're eating incorrectly and not exercising, and you're eating a lot frequently, well, your sugar's always up. So you're always releasing insulin. And eventually, the body cells stop responding to the effects of insulin. So you have reduced insulin sensitivity. Now you're really going towards prediabetes. And then the next step is insulin resistance. That's when the cells, your muscle cells, your fat cells, and your liver, they're not responding well to insulin. So you can't use sugar for energy. You can't store the sugar. It's a problem. So your pancreas is making more and more insulin over time. Your blood sugar levels are going up. You're on the way to developing diabetes. Now, welcome to our episode, Cocoa, Diabetes, and Insulin Sensitivity. Hi, my name is Jerry Hickey. I'm a nutritional pharmacist. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer over here at Invite Health. We're going to talk about cocoa, how it really has good data behind it. It helps prevent you from developing diabetes. Does it treat diabetes? That's a different story. I mean, it is an antioxidant, but that's a different story. Now, before we go into the cocoa, let's talk about some blood tests. One, they could look at your fasting blood sugar, your fasting plasma glucose. So what they generally do, you don't eat for 8 hours, and at that point the insulin should work well to store away all the excess sugar. If they see that the sugar is high after 8 hours of fasting or 12 hours of fasting, not a good thing. Then there's the oral glucose tolerance test. I mean, if you fail this, you pretty much are going into diabetes. They give you something called glucola. It's a cola loaded with 75 grams of sugar. That's over 2.5 ounces of sugar. You drink that, and then they want to see after 2 hours, did your blood sugar go down? If that's not working, terrible sign. And then they can look at your hemoglobin A1C test. That's your glycosylated hemoglobin, or HbA1c. That's a pretty good indicator that your blood sugar is fine or you have a problem with prediabetes or diabetes. Generally, a normal blood sugar level is below 5.7. Prediabetes is 5.7 to 6, and over 6 is diabetes. And you could get diabetics. I get diabetics in here all the time where their HbA1c is 8, 9, even 10 or 11. That's a disaster. So what that means, you have hemoglobin in your red blood cells. Hemoglobin is the red part of the blood cell. It's what carries oxygen. That's where the iron is. There's a slow chemical reaction in the body where sugar attaches to hemoglobin, but it takes about 2 or 3 months. So they look at this, they take a blood test, and they look at your HbA1c, and they say, well, you have this much sugar attached to your hemoglobin, so that's a good sign that your sugar was normal, or if it's high, that's a good sign that your sugar was elevated over the past 3 months. So it's a panoramic view of your blood sugar. It's a very powerful, if they give you the test for your insulin sensitivity, your blood sugar, if they give you a test for your blood sugar and your HbA1c, combining those is a very strong indicator that either you do have prediabetes, you don't have prediabetes, you're fine. Okay? That mixing those, the fasting blood sugar and the hemoglobin A1c test is the way to go to see if you have diabetes. Now, cocoa has been shown for over 30 years to have some impact on preventing diabetes. Even chocolate may have some of this ability. The problem is when they convert cocoa into chocolate, you lose some of the things that are protective and beneficial that lower your risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So let's talk about that. There's type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune diabetes where your immune system is attacking the pancreas and killing the cells that release insulin. Those people all their life are taking shots of insulin to keep their sugar normal. And then there's type 2 diabetes. That's the one that's more involved with obesity and poor food choices and lack of exercise. That's basically what we're talking about right now, type 2 diabetes mellitus. So for many, many years, they've shown that cocoa helps prevent type 2 diabetes. Now, can it treat it? It doesn't lower your blood sugar in diabetes, but it can help your blood vessels work better. It can help improve your circulation. It can help protect your brain. It can help protect your heart because of the powerful antioxidants in there. But once again, once you convert the cocoa into chocolate, the processing can destroy these ingredients. They're called flavin-thiols. They're very valuable, but they're also very vulnerable to damage. So when you process the cocoa, you're adding the milk fat, you're adding the sugar, you're Dutching it, and it can destroy these flavin-thiols. So a better choice is real cocoa. So here's a study on, it's from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. The effects of cocoa and its flavin-thiols on cardiovascular health. Now, it's a systematic review and meta-analysis. It's by Norwich Medical School, the University of East Anglia in the UK, in England. Now, a systematic review means that you went through all of these electronic websites where they collate research, like PubMed and Ovid, and Cochrane Review and Embase and Medline. And you find the studies looking at cocoa and diabetes. And then you do a meta-analysis. You have to go through each study and see if it's valid and if it's looking at what you want to look at, in this case, cocoa preventing diabetes. So once you do a meta-analysis and it's done well, it's powerful evidence that something either works or doesn't work. So this is 42 studies, 42 randomized controlled human clinical trials. These are state-of-the-art studies, gold standard studies, where you have the placebo-controlled randomized studies. And they found that cocoa, it helped circulation. They call it flow-mediated dilation. The blood vessels were working better. It reduced high blood pressure. It slightly reduced bad cholesterol, and it improved good cholesterol, HDL, the protective cholesterol. But what we're looking for in this conversation is its effect on lowering the risk of diabetes, and it did. It improved insulin resistance. They saw that the insulin was working better because it significantly reduced serum insulin over time. And that, I mean, right there, 42 studies. It improved insulin sensitivity. It lowered fasting blood glucose. It was lowering insulin resistance. It was reducing the blood insulin levels. It was making everything go back to normal. Diabetes, by the way, is not just a disease of sugar. It's a disease of metabolism. A lot of things are going up. Inflammation is going up in the body. Chances are uric acid is going up. Blood fats are going up, like your total cholesterol, your bad cholesterol, which is called LDL, your triglycerides, which is a second kind of greasy fat other than LDL. Your good cholesterol generally dropping. You can't make energy because you can't use sugar to make energy. And all of these things are correctable. And we've done a number of podcasts on this, a number of episodes. And the other thing is that, of course, your sugar's going up. And that sugar, over time, attaches to tissues and causes a process called glycation. So it damages the little blood vessels that feed your nerves, and you start to develop nerve damage, diabetic peripheral neuropathy. It damages the little blood vessels in the back of the eyes, so you start to develop diabetic retinopathy, blood vessel disease of the eye. It's damaging the walls of the blood vessels in the heart. You're developing a coronary heart disease. It's damaging the blood vessels in the brain. You're developing microvascular damage in the brain, so you're starting to lose memory cells and brain cells. It damages the cells in the kidneys that are filters. They're really repurposed blood vessels, kind of. So you start to lose kidney function. So a lot of terrible things are going on. And this happens, by the way, even in pre-diabetes, you're starting to develop damage to the little blood vessels and to the arteries, the big blood vessels that carry oxygen-rich blood away from the heart. So even pre-diabetes is not a good thing. In fact, they really should rename it possibly diabetes light or stage 1 diabetes or something, or low stage diabetes. The good news is pre-diabetes and even full-blown diabetes and a lot of people could be reversed. If you start eating healthy and you really start exercising, it really could be reversed. And let me tell you some supplements that you really need if you're starting to develop blood sugar problems. Vitamin D interacts with magnesium and zinc to control your blood sugar. Vitamin C is important because you're not using it correctly as an antioxidant to protect yourself. So some vitamin C with each meal 3 times a day. Vitamin B1, it's involved with the transketolase pathway, which helps control your blood sugar. Those are really important for diabetics. The 2 minerals, magnesium and zinc, the vitamin D, vitamin B1, really, really important for pre-diabetics and diabetics. It helps get your blood sugar back towards normal. So here's a second one. This is the main Syracuse longitudinal study. It's from 1975 to 2010. It's a major study. It started out in the University of Syracuse, and then the researchers moved to the University of Maine. And this is a subset of these people. It's 1,000 of these people. They lived at home. We call that community dwelling. They were like between their 50s and their 70s. 60% were women. And they found, hey, listen, if you had cocoa or chocolate consistently, habitually, it lowered your risk of developing diabetes. They found that even 5 years after the study ended, that it was still preventing diabetes. It really meant something. And they accounted for things like lifestyle, do you exercise, what else do you eat, what don't you eat, heart health. So they looked at all that. Did you exercise? They looked at all that. Having chocolate, I would go with dark chocolate, but really I would go with cocoa because the flavonols are definitely in cocoa. Several times a week was lowering the risk of diabetes. There's so many studies showing this. So here's the last one I'm going to talk about. It's from Brown University, Ivy League, that's up in Providence, Rhode Island. Emory University, that's in Oxford, Georgia. I heard that's a great town, by the way. Harvard Medical School in Boston, Harvard School of Public Health, and Warren Alpert Medical School and Rhode Island Hospital in Providence, Rhode Island. It's in the Journal of Nutrition. And once again, it's a systematic review and meta-analysis. So, we're talking about Harvard and Brown and Emory University. These are top-notch academic research institutions. So if they're going to do a systematic review and look for studies, and then go through those studies and pick out the ones that are well-reported, well-designed, lacking bias, and they do a meta-analysis, that's real. So it's 19 randomized controlled human clinical trials. They found that it really had an effect on cardiometabolic health. What's cardiometabolic? The heart, the circulatory system, and metabolism like blood sugar and cholesterol and stuff like that. So here's what they found. First of all, really important, cocoa lowered C-reactive protein. We know it does. There's a lot of studies showing this. C-reactive protein, when it's elevated, is a proxy for inflammation. But you could do a finer, more sensitive analysis. It's called high sensitivity C-reactive protein or high sensitivity CRP. And if that's elevated, that indicates you have inflammation in the heart and arteries. And that's bad. Because having a heart attack and heart disease is not just cholesterol, it's also inflammation. In 2017, they did a systematic review of everybody admitted to a hospital with a heart attack throughout the contiguous United States. And they found that a lot of these people, half of them, their cholesterol was fine. In fact, a lot of them, they had low cholesterol. They were on statin drugs like atorvastatin and simvastatin. There was something else going on there. The studies are showing that it's inflammation, that it's not just bad cholesterol. Because even if your bad cholesterol is low, you're taking a lot of atorvastatin or simvastatin or rosuvastatin and your cholesterol is low, if there's inflammation in the heart, it could still wreck the cholesterol, damage it, and you have these damaged remnants that become sticky and invasive and contribute to hardening of the arteries. Coronary heart disease, the biggest killer everywhere, including in America. So first and foremost, they found that the cocoa was lowering inflammation. Now we're talking Harvard, Emory University, and Brown University. It lowered inflammation in the heart. That makes cocoa right there good enough. It raised good cholesterol. It lowered triglycerides. That's a kind of greasy, sticky fat. And this is based on 19 randomized controlled human clinical trials. So what about preventing diabetes? Yes, it improved fasting insulin. It reduced insulin resistance. It improved insulin sensitivity. So what does that mean? Your insulin is supposed to drop in between meals. If it's not dropping, that's because the body's insensitive to it. When people did cocoa, yes, it did drop in between meals because you don't need it in between meals. And insulin resistance. The insulin was working better to store the sugar in between meals, which is just the opposite of prediabetes and diabetes. So there really is an impact on cocoa for your heart, for your health span, how long you stay healthy, likely for your lifespan. In fact, studies do show that cocoa lowers the risk of having a second heart attack or suffering with a stroke. There's a lot of studies showing this. But also on lowering your risk of developing diabetes. Now, we've done podcasts on eating well. We've done podcasts on diabetes before. We've done podcasts on exercise. You should listen to a couple of those episodes. I personally don't eat red meat. I do eat a little bit of chicken. I eat fish, probably about 3 times a week. What I eat is a lot of vegetables. I eat a little bit of fresh fruit, because fruit does have sugar. So even though fruit can be healthy, I keep the fruit intake down. And I tend to eat the really healthiest of fruits, which are like blueberries and blackberries and apples. I mean, those are really healthy fruits. So every day I'll have 2 or 3 pieces of fruit. But I'll have a lot of vegetables. I eat beans. I eat nuts, especially walnuts and pecans, unbelievably healthy, and almonds too. I eat seeds. I'll eat whole grain cereal. That's a good diet. I'll use extra virgin olive oil. I don't fry things. So I eat really well. I get my exercise. Every morning I do 30 minutes on my bike. And in the afternoon, about 3 or 4 days a week, I lift light weights. I don't go crazy. And I take walks whenever I can. So that keeps your blood sugar really in a good place. And then get a good multivitamin with some chromium and boron and vitamin B1 and magnesium and zinc and vitamin C and vitamin D, because those nutrients help keep your blood sugar in check. Your body uses those nutrients and a little bit of vanadium. You just need a tiny amount. Those nutrients keep your blood sugar in a better place. Okay, thanks for tuning in to the Invite Health Podcast. You can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com. Yeah, just go to our cover page and you just scroll down and there's a big icon for the podcast. Please subscribe and please leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. We'll see you next time on another episode of the Invite Health Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.